The gap theory was invented to try to get millions of years in between verse 1 and verse 2 of Genesis chapter 1. So in verse 1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Verse 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. The idea is that between those two verses, there's a gap of millions or billions of years. Lucifer is cast down and becomes Satan.
Yep.
There's something called Lucifer's flood that produced the fossil record. And there were people living and dying before Adam and Eve.
Now, hopefully, if you've seen the previous 3 episodes already, you can see some of these problems yourself, right? First, it puts death and suffering before the fall, before the curse. That's the problem with almost all attempts to get millions of years into the Bible. Same problem. They end up undermining the gospel, as we explained in those episodes. By itself, that's enough to invalidate the gap theory.
Another thing that should raise red flags is that the gap theory started in the early 1800s, when the idea of millions of years and an old earth gained popularity. It didn't come from careful study of the Bible, but from outside secular views.
Proverbs 2:6 says, "For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding." So let's look again to Scripture for the answer. The bottom line is, Scripture does not allow for a time gap there. In fact, it seriously violates the tenets of the historical grammatical exegesis.
The Hebrew words tohu and bohu, translated without form and void in Genesis 1:2, are claimed by Gappists to indicate a judgmental destruction.
Yeah.
But tohu occurs several times in the Bible, in which it is used in a morally neutral state, describing something that's unfinished, but not necessarily evil. Hebrew scholars and the church have for centuries taken the view that Genesis 1:2 is not a scene of judgment or an evil state created by the fall of angels, but a description of the original, yet to be completed state of the universe.
Wow is the name of a Hebrew letter which is used as a conjunction. It can mean and, but, now, then, and a few other things, depending on the context and the type of wow involved. Now here, you see it here at the beginning of verse 2.
This type of wow is a wow disjunctive because it's followed by a non-verb.
Right.
It introduces a parenthetic statement. It's alerting the reader to put the following passage in brackets as if it were a descriptive phrase about the previous noun. It doesn't indicate something that's following in a time sequence.
Right.
Now, this would have been indicated by a different Hebrew construction called the wow consecutive, where wow is followed by a verb. So grammatically, it's not possible to put a time gap in there.
Yeah, another thing Gappists point to is the word replenish that you see there in Genesis 1:28. Today, in English, that word means refill. Well, if Adam and Eve were commanded to refill the earth, there must have been people living and dying before them at some point.
Humans died before Adam sinned? Oops.
Yeah. But the Hebrew translated replenish in the King James Version means to fill, not refill. The Hebrew means fill. In the 1600s in English, that's what the word replenish also meant. But that word has changed meanings in English, so it's no longer an accurate translation today. It was in the 1600s.
And there are other problems with the gap theory, but those are enough that hopefully you can see it's an attempt to get millions of years into the Bible that doesn't work.
It doesn't work, yeah.